For resource of Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, Dr. Sri Hastuti Puspitasari, SHMH. Honorable Vice Dean for Religious, Student, and Alumni Affairs, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, Dr. Andes Agustrianta, MA, MH, PhD. The Honorable the Head of Law Major, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, along with the Secretary. Honorable the Head of Doctoral Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, along with the leaders. Honorable the Head of Master Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, along with the leaders. Honorable the Head of Undergraduate Study Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, Dodik Setiawan Nur Herianto, SHMH, LLM, PhD. Honorable the Head of Undergraduate Business Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, along with the leaders. Honorable the Secretary of International Undergraduate Study Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, Dr. Aroma Elmina Marta, SHMH. Honorable the Secretary of Undergraduate Study Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia, Dr. Bagya Agung Prabowo, SHMHum, PhD. Honorable the speakers, distinguished speakers of the 7th International Student Colloquium 2025, Profesor Dr. I. Dewa Gede Palguna, SHMHum, Profesor Dr. Nikmatul Huda, SHMHum, Profesor Dr. Ildiko Barta, Associate Professor Dr. Kabiru Adamu, Profesor Dr. Ida Madiaha binti Abdul Ghani Azmi, and also our moderator Muhammad Adi Fauzani, SHMH, and all faculty members, distinguished guests, presenters, and students from Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia. Once more, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to the 7th International Student Colloquium 2025, proudly organized by the International Undergraduate Study Program in Law, Faculty of Law Universitas Islam Indonesia. It is truly an honor to gather here today to engage in the intellectual exchange in them navigating the crossroads, law, democracy, and constitutionalism in a shifting global landscape. To open our agenda today, let us open by reciting Basmalah together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. To bless our gathering, let us listen to the beautiful recitation of Holy Quran delivered by Brother Zaki Takyuddin. To Brother Zaki, the stage is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasy syaithanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. وقالوا لجلودهم لم شهدتم علينا قالوا أنطقنا الله الذي أنطق كل شيء. وهو خلقكم أول مرة وإليه ترجعون. وهو خلقكم أول مرة وإليه ترجعون. صدق الله الجبار العظيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Allahumma arhamna bil Quran. Thank you, Brother Zaki, for the beautiful recitation. Distinguished speakers, dear ladies and gentlemen, we will sing together the Indonesian national anthem, Indonesia Raya, followed by the hymn of Universitas Islam Indonesia. To ladies and gentlemen, we would invite you all to please rise and stand up. Thank you. Please be seated. Distinguished speakers, dear ladies and gentlemen, the next agenda is welcoming remarks and opening by the Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. We are honored to invite Professor Dr. Budi Agus Riswandi, SH.M.Hum, the Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. The stage is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrofil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'. Distinguished speaker, Profesor Dr. I Dewa Gede Palaguna SH.M.Hum, and also distinguished speaker Professor Dr. Ildiko Berta from the Brazen University, and Professor Dr. I Dewa Gede Palaguna from University of Udayana, and then Associate Professor Dr. Kabiru Adamu from Nigeria. Actually, your name university, it is difficult to say from me. And then Professor Dr. Ida from IIUM, and Professor Dr. Nikmatul Huda, SH.M.Hum from Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. The Honorable all-of leader in Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Here there are Professor Agus Trianta, and then Professor Aroma, Professor Bagja Agung Prabowo, and respected dear all of students from Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Good morning, everyone. It is great honor and privilege to welcome to International Student Colloquium 2025. This conference invites us to reflect on dynamic interaction, global legal development, and the enduring pursuit of human rights and democracy. In increasingly interconnected world and also era digital, the rule of law is vital to safeguard human rights and promoting equality and ensuring that democracy serves humanity as a whole. I hope this academic forum will inspire conductive dialogue, productive discussion, and innovative legal thinking for just, more, and human global order. Thank you. I wish you successful and inspiring conference. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Please give a round of applause. Thank you very much to Professor Budi Agus Riswandi from the Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia for inspiring remarks. To enrich the cultural atmosphere for today's colloquium, We'll now enjoy a traditional performance, Saman Dance, originating from Aceh, Indonesia, performed by Safira. Enjoy the performance. This is Safira.
Cek cek cek. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Allahu Allah 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 ya Rabbi. Kekamo nebri sejahtera dalam dunia. Salam alaikum wahai kaum nang rometua yang membahagia terus ake masa. Alhamdulillah, puja ke Tuhan yang pejat alam langit dengan dunia, termasuk laut atas janjongan penghule alam Rasul Anbiya. hai dek tajak medike taduk besare bertepada banja. Menjino jaman ka ake ku tangan digle hai dike kureng na budaya Islam sayang rap rele budaya kafe rame yang hawa budaya Islam sayang rap rele budaya kafe rame yang hawa. Amin Allah summa amin. Allah berkat rahmat Allah yang memberi nang doa Aceh makmur sejahtera. Janggut kunengan mise hantam ta cembe di kamu salah. Lam burak menari lam ateh runggunong lamba cabeng bungong ane lekuah lam burak menari lam ateh runggunong lamba cabeng bungong ane lekuah. Si jempa mirah si ulah karekam anak gelombang 7 lam o patah manyang di dalam minyak melabur punca bendera-bendera meapit-apit punca masjid-masjid meputa-puta puput agama-agama bin-kebin awate syahid syahid asosiruga aro pulau Pinang di badak gelombang 7 lam o patah manyang di dalam minyak melabur. Hum ale ale hum hum sayanglah mealun padelam lesung hum 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 ale hum sayang mealun padelam lesung sayang hum 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 ale hum sayang mealun padelam lesung sayang. Raja Lun, Raja Barosa, pajan kehne jaksa gampung kamo beikhlas hati wate ne teka bermetuah bermebahagia hoka Raja Lun betul napio bak kampungnya hoka Raja Lun betul napio bak kampungnya. Sekian, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Safira. This performance has truly honored and highlighted the diversity of Indonesia heritage. Thank you for sharing this exceptional performance with us today. And we also extend our deepest condolence for the recent condition in Aceh. May God grant patience and strength to the families affected and provide comfort to the people and help the people of Aceh recover from this difficult time. Our thoughts and prayers are with the entire community of Aceh during this period of hardship. Now we are honored to listen the keynote speech by His Excellencies Professor Dr. I. Dewagede Palguna, SHM Hum, Professor of Faculty of Law, Udayana University, and Chief of Constitutional Court Ethics Council, period 2024-2025. Without further ado, for His Excellencies, the stage is yours.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to this beautiful campus with beautiful scenery and Mount Merapi to the east of us. The 2022 report from the Economist Intelligence Unit presents an interesting yet disturbing anomaly in Indonesia's democratic landscape, where the democracy index improved after the Constitutional Court decision on the job creation law, we called in Bahasa Indonesia Omnibus Law. This phenomenon is not merely a statistical figure, but a vital sign that the Constitutional Court still plays an essential role as the latest safety valve for the continuity of democracy and the rule of law in Indonesia. The implicit statement in the report actually sends two very profound philosophical messages. First, excessive dependence on the MK signifies what Ran Hills calls the phenomenon of juristocracy, where fundamental political questions are shifted from the representative legislative arena to the technocratic courtroom. This indicates a functional paralysis, quote unquote, of the executive and legislative branches of the power. The second message, the Constitutional Court has an existential role in ensuring that the rule of law does not degenerate into rule of law and into rule by law, or what Kim Lane-Scapel refers to as, quote unquote, autocratic legalism, the use of law to consolidate power. From a political perspective, we must understand the Constitutional Court is essentially a political court and not merely an institution that operates in a vacuum of positive law per se. As the sole final interpreter of the Constitution, every strike of the Constitutional Court Judge's gavel is a political act that determines the direction of the pendulum of the state power, whether it will move towards reality before our eyes. Before it will move to I think I lost. It is moved towards the authoritarian or remain faithful to the democratic path. Hans Kelsen, the conceptual architect of the Constitutional Court, envisioned this institution, the Constitutional Court, as negative legislator, tasked with purifying legislative political products so that they remain in line with the agreed upon basic norms, or Grundnorm, according to Kelsen of the Constitution. Therefore, the Constitutional Court philosophically bears a double burden. It must act as an impartial guardian of the law, but at the same time, it must also have the political sensitivity of statesmanship to ensure that the ideal constitutional track is not distorted by a short-term political pragmatism. The existence of the Constitutional Court is a manifestation of the constitutional distrust of the majority in power, ensuring that democracy does not commit suicide through the abuse of procedural mechanisms. However, praise for the Constitutional Court role in improving the democracy index must also be read with deep skepticism, not with intoxicating euphoria. Is the improvement in the index a sign of a permanent institutional revival? Or is it just a momentary anomaly before a bigger storm of co-optation hits this judicial fortress? We remember Alexander Hamilton, one of the famous Federalist Paper writers. In the Federalist Paper number 78, referred to the judiciary as the least dangerous branch of government. However, in the modern era, Tom Ginsburg and Assis Hawk remind us that judicial institutions can actually become a weak point that facilitates democratic retrogression if co-optation occurs. We need to reflect on whether the Constitutional Court currently stands tall as the guardian of the Constitution, or whether it is experiencing what Mark Tusnet calls constitutional hardball, where political actors follow constitutional procedures but violate unwritten democratic norms for partisan gain. This reflection is crucial starting point before we further examine the role of Constitutional Court amid the wave of abusive constitutionalism that is sweeping many modern democracies now. Without this critical awareness, we risk of being trapped in the romanticism of the past about the Constitutional Court, while reality before our eyes shows that the guardian of the Constitution is facing an unprecedented existential threat. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers, and all participants of this colloquium, to understand the weight of the burden borne by the Constitutional Court today, we need to turn back time and see how the history of the birth of this institution is the direct antithesis of the new order's practical abuse of power. We are talking about the Indonesian experience. The birth of the Constitutional Court in Indonesia after the 1998 reform movement or reformasi was a manifestation of what John Hart Ely called an effort to overcome distrust of the majoritarian political process. Ely argues in Democracy and Distrust that the primary role of the court is to clear the channels of political change and protect unrepresented minorities. The new order thought that parliamentary supremacy without judicial review is a recipe for tyranny. Therefore, the Constitutional Court was designed as the counter-majoritarian mechanism to ensure that democracy does not commit suicide through oppressive majority decisions. This spirit is in line with Mauro Capelleti's thinking on the global expansion of judicial review as a wave of constitutional justice to protect human rights from state arbitrariness. The founders of the nation in the Reformation era realized that procedural democracy alone was not enough. A technocratic judicial mechanism was needed to safeguard the substantive democracy so that the tyranny of the majority in parliament would not stifle the constitutional rights of minorities. The Constitutional Court was designed as an institution with extraordinary authority to overturn political decisions made by the people's representative, a power that in the logic of pure democracy seems paradoxical, of course, but in the logic of constitutionalism, it is a necessity. The hopes placed on the shoulders of the 9 constitutional judges or justices are enormous. They are legal experts who are expected to be free from practical political interests, acting as the sole binding interpreters of the Constitution, whose words are final and binding. It is in its early years, the Constitutional Court succeeded in proving itself to be an oasis of justice in the midst of public distrust of judicial institutions, with a series of progressive decisions that favored human rights. The Constitutional Court dared to break through the rigidity of the text of the law in order to achieve substantive justice, create new jurisprudence, and even in some cases dared to go what many said ultra petita in order to save greater constitutional interests. History records how the Constitutional Court restored the protection of human rights, overturned the privatization of water that detrimental to the people, and upheld the independence of other state institutions from executive co-optation. The Constitutional Court became a symbol of the victory of legal reasoning over the reasoning of power, proof that Reformation had succeeded in giving birth to an offspring capable of upholding the noble ideals of the Constitution. However, history also teaches us that institutions with great power will always be the prime targets of control, and the Constitutional Court's honeymoon period with democracy now appears to be facing its toughest test yet. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and all participants of this colloquium, over the past 5 years, the Constitutional Court has shown a confusing duality to many. On the one hand, it appears as a hero, but on the other hand, it seems to be held hostage by practical political interests and rigid legal formalism. The ruling on the job creation law is the most obvious example of this ambivalence, in which the Constitutional Court dared to declare the law conditionally unconstitutional. This decision was a legal breakthrough that recognized that flawed legal formation procedures due to the neglect of meaningful public participation cannot be ignored, even though the government's follow-up through a government regulation in lieu of law, or Perpu, ultimately sparked a new constitutional debate. The Constitutional Court's boldness in this decision provided a breath of fresh air, showing that the doctrine of procedural due process of law still has a place in the courtroom, emphasizing that the end, in this case enforcement, does not justify the means, in this case reckless procedures. However, this optimism was shattered by, sorry to say, decision number 90, 2023, on the age limit of presidential and vice presidential candidates that cleared the way for Mr. Gibran Rakabuming Raka, our vice president now, then the President Joko Widodo's son for vice presidential race. This decision is not only found ethically flawed, according to a decision of the Court's Ethics Council chaired by the Court's former Chief Justice, Professor Jimli Al-Siddiqui, but also marks a low point where the Constitutional Court has become trapped as political instrument of power to perpetuate political dynasties. This decision, viewed by many, reflects the Court's loss of its dignity as the guardian of the Constitution and its shift in function to become a facilitator of elite interest, sacrificing the principle of impartiality to accommodate short-term political desires. That's what the people viewed the decision number 90 of 2023. This ruling is an example of what Ron Hills warned about in his writing Towards Juristocracy, that threatened political elites will use the courts to secure their interests when they cannot achieve them through the normal electoral process. The ruling in the decision number 90, 2023 exemplifies what Samuel Issacharoff said about the fragility of democratic institutions in the hands of populist incumbents who manipulate the law. In addition to practical political traps, the Constitutional Court is also often caught in what many civil society activists say as political formalisms when deciding other crucial cases that affect the livelihood of many people and the structure of the state. In the formal review of several strategic laws, such as the revisions of the KPK law or the revision of law on Corruption Eradication Commission, the Minerva law or the law on mining, and most recently the law on the TNI, the armed forces, the Constitutional Court often hides, according to many civil society activists, hides behind the doctrine of even legal policy of the legislators. With this excuse, the Constitutional Court seems to was, viewed by many, the Constitutional Court seems to wash its hands and allow the legislative process, which is flawed in terms of participation and violates the principles of law formation, to remain legally valid. This formalistic attitude is very dangerous because it negates the essence of meaningful participation, that is, the right to be heard, the right to be considered, and the right to be given explanations, which should be the spirit of every legislative process in a democratic country. When the Constitutional Court turns a blind eye to procedural flaws on the ground of legislative authority, behind the pretext of open legal policy, it is actually allowing the procedural democracy to kill substantive democracy. Therefore, the Constitutional Court currently stands at a crossroads, as the theme of this colloquium. Filled with confusions. It is expected to be a savior, but its own feet are bound by the burden of controversial historical decisions and inconsistency of its judges' attitude, at least according to many opinions of civil society's activists. The challenge faced by the Constitutional Court is no longer simply interpreting the text of the Constitution, but how to free itself from the shackles of increasingly sophisticated and systematic political cooptation. Public trust, which had been restored, must be prevented from eroding again so as not to leave a big question of the Constitutional Court is still capable of being the last bastion of justice, or whether it has become part of the problem itself. Without radical corrections to the paradigms of judges and international and institutional independence, the Constitutional Court risks of losing its relevance as the guardian of democracy and will only be remembered as a monument of the failure of legal reform. Hopefully not. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished speakers and participants of this colloquium, currently the Constitutional Court is in a very difficult and existential situation. Caught between public expectation to tackle the wave of abusive constitutionalism and the political reality that is dragging it into the vortex of this destructive phenomenon. Abusive constitutionalism, as popularized by David Landau and Rosalind Dixon, is the use of constitutional mechanisms such as amendment or court rulings to weaken the democratic and constitutional order itself. In the Indonesian context, we are witnessing how the law is no longer used as a tool to limit power, but is being weaponized to strengthen and perpetuate the power of the executive and its oligarchic alliances. The Constitutional Court, which should be the antithesis of this practice, has instead become the target of a systematic weakening operation so that it no longer stands in the way of unconstitutional political agendas. The most obvious indication of this abusive constitutionalism can be seen in a series of attempts to revise the Constitutional Court law. I think yesterday we already been discussed in Universitas Islam Indonesia also, which have always been oriented toward taming constitutional judges rather than strengthening the institution. The revision of the Constitutional Court law, which focuses on the issues of the term of office and age limit of judges, for example, is a covert court-packing tactic. To me, it's a covert court-packing tactic to ensure that the composition of judges is filled with figures who are loyal to those in power and at least open to compromise. Furthermore, the bad precedent of dismissal of Constitutional Court Judge Aswanto, I'm sorry to say, by the House of Representatives, who was then replaced by a figure chosen unilaterally by the House, is clear evidence of how the legislative branch brutally intervenes in the judicial independence due to dissatisfactions with judges' decisions. Although the current duo Chief Justice and Vice Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Mr. Suhartoyo and Saldi Isra, is trying to restore the court's dignity, the shadow of intervention and the threat of dismissal or revision of laws that are detrimental to judges remains a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. The situation places the Constitutional Court in a paradoxical position. It is expected to be the antidote of the poison of authoritarianism, even though its own body is being eroded by that poison. If the Constitutional Court fails to survive this wave of abusive constitutionalism, we have a very strong reason to believe that we will witness the collapse of the last pillar of the Indonesian democracy, where the constitution will become nothing more than a dead document without anyone brave enough to bring it to life. Resistance to the weakening of the Constitutional Court is no longer merely a technical legal issue now, but a moral struggle to defend the soul of this republic from hijacking by a handful of power-drunk elites. Ladies and gentlemen, the Constitutional Court is currently at the lowest point of its existential crisis, standing fragile as the only remaining hope, while also becoming a victim of a grand scenario orchestrated by forces seeking to paralyze judicial control. We can no longer naively view the Constitutional Court as a sacred ivory tower. It is now a bloody battleground between pro-democracy forces and oligarchic forces seeking to hijack the Constitution. The weakening of the Constitutional Court through legislative revisions, the politicization of judges' selection, and the delegitimation of barriers, the legitimation of its rulings are part of a grand design to remove constitutional barriers to absolute power. If this bastion falls, there will be nothing left to stop the wave of autocratic legalisms that will sweep away the remnants of our civil liberties. So, allow me please to pose a critical question that should resonate in each of our minds. Where are we now? Will the Constitutional Court end up as a fossil of failed? Will the Constitutional Court end up as a fossil of failed democracy, or will it rise again as the fierce guardian, brave enough to say no to power even if the sky falls down? The Constitutional Court position in the future will depend heavily on how strong the pressure from the public and civil society is in shielding the independence of the judges with integrity. We must not allow upright judges to fight alone in the silence of the courtroom, while the predators of democracy wage guerrilla warfare in the corridors of power to remove them. Therefore, our presence in these discussions and the discourse should not stop at the level of intellectual exchange of ideas or collective lamentation on social media alone. We must go beyond assumptions and diagnosis. We must move towards real and measurable practical steps. Our task is to rally the forces of civil society, conduct public examinations of every decision and behavior of judges, and exert massive political pressure on the House of Representatives and the government to stop all form of intervention in the Constitutional Court. Saving the Constitutional Court is saving the life of democracy itself, and that requires moral courage, consistency of attitude, and full awareness that silence is a betrayal of the Constitution. Let us reclaim the Constitutional Court. not for the interest of certain groups, but for the sake of upholding a just rule of law for all the people of Indonesia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for the insightful and inspiring keynote speech. Your words have certainly enriched our understanding and provided valuable perspective, and we truly appreciate the time and effort you have taken with us today. Distinguished speakers, dear ladies and gentlemen, it is now our honor to express our gratitude through delivery, a token of appreciation from Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. The first session of token of appreciation will be delivered to His Excellency Professor Dr. I. Dewa Gede Palguna SHM Hum, and as the keynote speaker given by the Dean of Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia, Professor Dr. Budi Agus Riswandi SHM Hum. To the Dean of Faculty of Law and to Professor Palguna, the floor is yours. To Professor, please stay on the stage. Professor, we invite you please to be on stage. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I would like to invite the following distinguished speakers to come up to the stage. The first, Professor Dr. Ildiko Barta from University of Debrecen, Hungary. Please give round of applause. And then to Associate Professor Dr. Kabiru Adamu from Bayero University, Nigeria. Please give round of applause. And then Professor Dr. Nikmatul Huda, SHM Hum from Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia. Please give round of applause. And through online, to Professor Dr. Ida Madiha binti Abdul Ghani Azmi, who attended via Zoom meeting. And also to Muhammad Adi Fauzani as moderator, SHM Hum, and we invite you to come up to the stage. This token of appreciation is also cooperated with the head of undergraduate study program in Law Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia, to Dodi Setiawan Nur Herianto, SHMH LLM PhD. Please to come out to the stage. We also invite to all the leaders, to Associate Professor Bagya and also Associate Professor Sri Hastuti, Huwadek, and also Pak Bagya. We would like to invite you. So now, to commemorate the special occasion, all the distinguished speakers, leaders, are invited to join the group photograph. 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we also invite all the speakers to standing in front of the audiences, because we will have a photo together with all the audiences. So we invite all the leaders to stand up to in front of the audience. We'll have another second photo session together with the audiences. Thank you. To all the audiences, we invite you to stand up. We will have the photo session. Thank you. Once more, to all the audience, we invite you to stand up. Yeah, thank you. Okay, we start the photo group session. 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Please give round of applause. Thank you, dear ladies and gentlemen. We now proceed to the plenary session with our distinguished speakers and moderated by Muhammad Adi Fauzani, SHMH. And we would like to remind that during the plenary session, we request all the audiences and all participants to refrain from using mobile phones in order to maintain focus and ensure a smooth and uninterrupted discussions. And we sincerely appreciate your cooperation to not using your mobile phones during plenary session. Without further ado, to Mr. Muhammad Adi Fauzani, SHMH, as the moderator, the floor is yours. Please give round of applause to Bapak Muhammad Adi Fauzani.
Yes. Thank you, Master of Ceremony, Mas Farhan, for the opportunity. Good morning, everyone. Distinguished keynote speakers and speakers, respected faculty members, and all of lecturers, Faculty of Law, Universitas Islam Indonesia, honorable presenters, beloved students, and all participants joining us in this event. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. For the first time, I welcome you to the 7th International Student Colloquium with the theme Navigating the Crossroads, Law, Democracy, and Constitutionalism in a Shifting Global Landscape. This title, a theme that, if we are being honest, sounds like title of PhD dissertation, yeah, it can make our it can make us head edge, yeah. But don't worry, we have 4 brilliant scholars who can actually explain it in detail. Unlike many of us who simply note wisely, yeah, during the seminar, even sleepy. Yeah. But don't worry, we have 4 brilliant scholars. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, allow me to share a short thought. The theme reflects that the world is changing so fast. Laws are tested, democracies are questioned, and constitutions are asked to solve the problem. The problem they never designed for, yeah. Sometimes the issues become so complicated that even law looks confused, yeah. If the law could talk, yeah, if the law can talk, it might say, excuse me, but this issue was not my job description, because the issue is very dynamic and fast changed. So that's why we gather here to help each other make sense of those rapid change. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are truly privileged to learn from our distinguished expert from Indonesia, from Hungary, from Nigeria and Malaysia. So let me introduce them one by one. First speaker, she is one of Indonesia's most respected constitutional law. We were familiar to her, yeah, because she is our lecturer. We can easily find her book because she has wrote more than maybe 20 or 30 books, yeah. So please welcome to the stage Prof. Nikmatul Huda. Second speaker, she will take us to Europe's digital landscape. She is head of Department for European and International Law. She comes from University of Debrecen, Hungary. Please join with us, Professor Ildiko Barta. And third speaker, she will join by Zoom, yeah. She leads the field of intellectual property law and cyber law. She is the Dean of Ahmad Ibrahim Kuliah of Laws and also lecturer in International Islamic University, Malaysia. She has a lot of experiences according to intellectual property practice in Malaysia. She will join us by Zoom. So Professor Ida Madiha, are you connected with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Ida.
You can see me.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see you from Videotron. Yeah. Fourth speaker, he is Associate Professor of Law in Department of International Law and Jurisprudence of Law, Faculty of Law, Bayero University. He also have a lot of students here, yeah, and they are joining with us behind him, yeah. He is an author of more than 20 publications, both local and foreign journals. He has many experiences in public and private sector according to law in Nigeria. So please join with us, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. So ladies and gentlemen, because before we continue to the main session, I will divide this seminar into two sessions. The first session is for presentation, and the second session is for question and answer. And participants, we provide you the gift, 3 best question or 3 best statement, yeah. So please prepare yourself. And now, without further ado, let's us begin our intellectual journey. And every speaker will deliver their materials around 15 until 20 minutes, yeah. Please, because we will divide it into 4 speakers. Okay, for the first speaker, it will be Professor Nikmatul Huda, and I will help her to conclude the materials.
Makasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Mohon maaf saya menyampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Yang saya hormati Prof. Palguna yang sudah berkenan menjadi keynote speech. Yang saya hormati Profesor Ildiko Berta. Yang saya hormati Profesor Kabiru Adamu dan Profesor Ida Madiha dan Mas Adi sebagai moderator. Saya diminta untuk berbicara tentang kebebasan berbicara dan dalam konteks kepercayaan terhadap legislator. Saya memberi judul ketidakbebasan berbicara dan menurunnya kepercayaan terhadap legislator. Jadi saya mengambil sisi yang berbeda dari judul, artinya negatifnya gitu. Kenapa gitu ya? Kenapa saya memberi judul ketidakbebasan berbicara? Karena fakta di lapangan kita diberi kebebasan jaminan di konstitusi, tetapi fakta di lapangan tidak ada kebebasan berbicara. Itu yang akan saya sampaikan. Nanti Mas Adi yang oke. Slide pertama. Ya. Oh, ini halaman keberapa ini? Ya, baik. Pada bulan Ramadan tahun 2023 mungkin kita masih ingat ketika RDP Prof. Mahfud sebagai Menko Polhukam dengan DPR waktu itu ada salah satu ketua komisi 3 Bapak Bambang Wuryanto atau Pak Bambang Pacul itu menyampaikan bahwa anggota dewan itu hanyalah petugas partai, atau bahasa guyonan beliau Korea-Korea saja gitu. Jadi bukan yang mengambil inisiatif untuk membuat putusan di dalam konteks demokrasi yang ada di dalam parlemen. Nah, pernyataan dari Pak Bambang Wuryanto ini kemudian menyentak publik gitu ya, bahwa ternyata kita salah mempersepsi parlemen itu tempatnya orang-orang yang menyuarakan aspirasi masyarakat. Jadi penentunya tuh bukan mereka, bukan wakil rakyat, tetapi ketua atau elit partai. Pertanyaannya kemudian anggota parlemen kalau begitu itu wakil rakyat atau wakil partai atau petugas partai. Itu satu persoalan yang sangat menarik untuk dikaji baik di level S1 sampai S3. Hakikat dari posisi wakil rakyat itu sesungguhnya ada di mana gitu ya. Kajian-kajian disertasi banyak membahas tentang ini. Makna petugas partai itu lantas apa? Kemudian apa pentingnya rakyat harus digerakkan, harus didorong, diberi keyakinan harus pergi ke TPS untuk melakukan pemilihan. Kalau ujung-ujungnya nanti ternyata dia hanya sekedar menjadi petugas partai yang tidak bisa bergerak untuk menyuarakan aspirasi rakyatnya. Gitu. Kajian tentang teoritisnya nanti banyak sekali. Kemudian yang kedua tentang ketidakpercayaan publik. Nah ini monggo Mas. Halo. Nah, loh. Nah, maaf ya, sebaiknya jangan guyon dulu. Gitu. Oke, ketidakpercayaan publik itu juga terjadi kemarin di minggu terakhir bulan Agustus 2025, gitu ya. Itu ekspresi gitu ya, puncak kemarahan publik terhadap lembaga parlemen dan wakil-wakilnya. Peristiwa tersebut membuka mata publik betapa rapuhnya relasi antara rakyat dan institusi negara. Sorotan publik mengarah pada ketidakpercayaan mereka terhadap wakil di parlemen dan institusi Polri. Laporan media sepanjang 2025 berkali-kali mengangkat rendahnya kepercayaan publik terhadap dua institusi ini. Wakil rakyat lebih sibuk ngurusi kepentingan partai atau dirinya sendiri dan golongan ketimbang aspirasi pemilihnya. Ini juga sudah didiskusikan kemarin di Undip dengan MPR dan Civitas Akademika di Jawa Tengah tentang bagaimana menempatkan posisi hubungan antara rakyat dan wakil rakyat. Berikutnya, kalau kita lihat indeks persepsi korupsi maupun indeks demokrasi di Indonesia, Transparansi Internasional mengatakan bahwa per 30 Januari 2024 bahwa IPK Indonesia di 2023 itu mengalami stagnan di angka 34 dari maksimal 100 dari sebelumnya 38 di 2021. Nah, stagnasi skor IPK Indonesia ini dinilai lebih banyak disumbang oleh persoalan pada penegakan hukum dan korupsi politik. IPK ini menjadi titik terendah sejak 2015. Perolehan ini juga membuat posisi Indonesia berada pada peringkat 110 dari 180 negara yang disurvei. Laporan Economic Intelligence itu juga di 2020 skor indeks demokrasi Indonesia di 2020 6,3 turun dari sebelumnya 6,48. Ini indikasi-indikasi untuk menilai apakah benar dugaan publik bahwa tingkat demokrasi Indonesia itu semakin hari semakin menurun gitu ya. Jadi sudah ada yang hasil-hasil survei yang dilakukan oleh lembaga-lembaga yang kredibel. Berikutnya, indeks demokrasi elektoral Indonesia terus juga mengalami penurunan sejak 2013 dengan indeks di kisaran 0,7 sejak era pasca demokrasi 98. Demokrasi Indonesia terkategori cukup berkualitas. Namun sejak tahun 2013 indeks demokrasi elektoral Indonesia turun tajam menjadi hanya di kisaran 0,5. Artinya sejak 2013 hingga sekarang demokrasi elektoral Indonesia masih tetap demokrasi, tetapi kualitasnya yang menurun gitu ya. Ada yang mengatakan kemunduran demokrasi atau regresi dan seterusnya. Berikutnya, nah, beberapa kalangan mengatakan bahwa demokrasi dinilai oleh para pengamat dan pejuang demokrasi sedang mengalami stagnasi, erosi, bahkan resesi. Ada yang regresi, bahkan ada yang mengatakan mati gitu ya, Ziblatt sama Lewinsky. Demokrasi mati itu tidak dengan senjata ya, tetapi justru dilakukan oleh pemimpin yang terpilih melalui demokrasi. Dia membajak prosesnya yang membawa mereka ke kekuasaan. Misalnya bentuknya apa gitu ya, yaitu dia mengubah lembaga-lembaga independen dengan kekuasaan sebagai salah satu mitra dalam pembentukan undang-undang. Dia menurunkan kualitas independensi dari sebuah lembaga menjadi tidak independen. Contohnya KPK. KPK sebagai lembaga independen 2019 diubah menjadi di bawah kekuasaan presiden. Itu berarti kemundurannya terjadi di situ gitu ya. Mereka menjadikan pengadilan atau badan netral lainnya sebagai senjata membeli media massa dan sektor swasta, mengubah aturan politik agar keseimbangan kekuatan berubah merugikan lawan. Jadi lembaga peradilan pun juga tadi sudah sebagian diceritakan oleh Pak Palguna, bagaimana Mahkamah Konstitusi itu bisa kemudian 9 hakimnya diperiksa semuanya melanggar kode etik gitu ya, karena membuat putusan yang sangat fenomenal, yaitu putusan permohonan dari Almas Sakit Biru gitu ya. Nah, di situ ternyata lembaga peradilan dikatakan sebagai senjata, malahan ya, senjata yang memakan rakyatnya gitu. Berikutnya, lanjut lagi. Nah, ada Firman Nur dari BRIN mengatakan bahwa demokrasi kita ini seperti lip service saja gitu ya. Pemilu yang pelaksananya jauh dari makna demokrasi dan penuh dengan rekayasa atau bahkan kecurangan. Kita bisa saksikan di 2024 kemarin gitu ya. Bagaimana hiruk pikuknya pemilu di Indonesia Kalau kita butuh bukti, baca dissenting opinion dari 3 hakim MK yang semuanya guru besar, itu semuanya menyoroti tentang betapa pemilu presiden di 2024 itu mobilitas ASN menjadi tidak netral, kemudian presiden yang ikut bermain di situ cawe-cawe, kemudian aparatur pemerintah juga ikut bermain, kemudian penggunaan APBN atau bansos yang tidak tepat sasaran dan seterusnya. Itu menunjukkan betapa memang hakim-hakim ini pun memberikan kesaksian melalui dissenting opinionnya Prof. Eni, Prof. Arif dan Prof. Saldi Isra ya, di dalam putusan itu. Kemudian terdapat institusi hukum dan cukup dijalankan tetap menghasilkan hadbal constitution atau rule of law, rule by law, di mana hukum direkayasa untuk melayani kepentingan kalangan tertentu yang berkuasa. Tadi juga sudah disinggung oleh Prof. Palguna. Media dibiarkan marak dan kalangan aktivis dibiarkan untuk ekspresi, tetapi tidak sedikit terjadi upaya untuk menahan arus kebenaran di media yang ada. Kalau Anda baca Kompas hari ini, penangkapan terhadap para aktivis masih terus berlangsung, gitu ya. Jadi yang menyuarakan aspirasi masyarakat itu masih saja terus berlangsung. Parlemen hidup, bahkan sebagian kalangan di dalamnya beroposisi dengan sengit, namun semua itu tetap berujung pada menangnya kebijakan penguasa, bahkan yang tidak relevan untuk kepentingan orang banyak. Berikutnya, ini janji-janji konstitusi ya tentang jaminan HAM ada di banyak pasal, dari pasal 28 sampai pasal 28J. Itu semuanya janji konstitusi untuk memberikan perlindungan HAM. Faktanya nanti kita lihat, gitu ya. Apakah memang setiap orang itu berhak atas jaminan pengakuan, perlindungan dan kepastian hukum atau tidak, perlindungan, pemajuan, penegakan, pemenuhan hak asasi atau tidak, dan seterusnya. Lanjut. Nah, ini yang fakta di lapangannya, gitu ya. Justru konstitusi ini tidak bisa dibunyikan, gitu. Karena apa? Karena justru yang terjadi pembungkaman terhadap aktivis. Meski sudah ada jaminan dalam konstitusi, praktek pelanggaran HAM setiap saat terjadi. Aktivis dan orang-orang yang kritis menyuarakan aspirasinya dibungkam, ditahan, disiksa, ditakut-takuti dan seterusnya. Berikutnya. Nah, Bivitri Susanti di Kompas, beliau menulis upaya meredam kemarahan yang dilakukan dengan membungkam para aktivis dan orang-orang yang kritis dengan 3 cara. Pertama yaitu penggunaan hukum. Ratusan orang masih ditahan dengan berbagai tuduhan yang terkait dengan demonstrasi, meskipun demonstrasi adalah tindakan konstitusional, gitu. Karena dijamin di konstitusi. Penggunaan narasi yang bersifat memojokkan, seperti kata-kata anti asing atau pelaku itu adalah teroris dan seterusnya. Ketiga, kekerasan fisik yang dialami oleh para demonstran, baik di jalanan maupun di dalam tahanan. Jadi fakta di lapangannya yang terjadi seperti itu, gitu ya. Berikutnya. Nah, sekarang kita lihat bagaimana hubungan rakyat itu dengan wakil rakyat. Sejatinya parlemen itu adalah perwakilan rakyat, berkaitan erat dengan kata le parler yang berarti dia harus berbicara, to speak. Artinya wakil rakyat itu adalah juru bicara rakyat, yaitu untuk menyuarakan aspirasi, kepentingan dan pendapat rakyat. Parlemen sebagai lembaga perwakilan rakyat tidak ubahnya merupakan wadah di mana kepentingan dan aspirasi rakyat itu diperdengarkan, diperjuangkan untuk menjadi materi kebijakan dan agar kebijakan itu dilaksanakan dengan tepat untuk kepentingan seluruh rakyat yang aspirasinya diwakili. Fungsi parlemen sebagai lembaga perwakilan rakyat yang paling pokok sebenarnya adalah fungsi representasi atau perwakilan itu sendiri. Lembaga perwakilan tanpa representasi tentulah tidak bermakna sama sekali. Nah, dalam hubungan ini penting dibedakan antara pengertian representation in present dan representation in ideas, gitu ya. Jadi apa yang seharusnya dan apa yang sesungguhnya terjadi, gitu ya. Berikutnya, yang pertama itu bersifat formal, yaitu keterwakilan yang dipandang dari segi kehadiran fisik. Sedangkan pengertian keterwakilan yang kedua bersifat substantif, yaitu perwakilan atas dasar aspirasi atau idea. Dalam pengertian yang formal, keterwakilan itu sudah dianggap ada apabila secara fisik dan resmi wakil rakyat yang terpilih sudah duduk di lembaga perwakilan rakyat. Secara substansial, keterwakilan rakyat itu sendiri baru dapat dikatakan tersalur apabila kepentingan nilai, aspirasi, dan pendapat rakyat yang diwakili benar-benar telah diperjuangkan dan berhasil menjadi bagian dari kebijakan yang ditetapkan oleh lembaga perwakilan rakyat yang bersangkutan, atau setidaknya aspirasi mereka sudah benar-benar diperjuangkan sehingga mempengaruhi perumusan kebijakan yang ditetapkan oleh parlemen. Berikutnya, untuk menjadi keterwakilan substantif itu, prinsip perwakilan dianggap tidak cukup hanya apabila suatu pendapat rakyat sudah disampaikan secara resmi ke lembaga perwakilan rakyat. Untuk menjamin hal itu masih dibutuhkan kemerdekaan pers, kebebasan berdemo, berunjuk rasa, bahkan hak mogok bagi buruh dan sebagainya, sehingga keterwakilan formal di parlemen itu dapat dilengkapi secara substantif. Jadi kalau kita hanya berharap supaya hanya parlemen yang berbicara, kita akan frustasi gitu, karena yang disuarakan mereka berbeda dengan apa yang kita inginkan. Dengan demikian perwakilan formal memang dapat dianggap penting, tetapi tetap tidak mencukupi untuk menjamin keterwakilan rakyat secara sejati dalam sistem demokrasi perwakilan yang dikembangkan dalam praktek. Berikutnya, nah sekarang hubungan wakil rakyat dengan partainya. Hubungan antara wakil rakyat dengan partai politiknya di Indonesia adalah partisan, karena wakil rakyat bertindak sesuai dengan keinginan atau program dari partai politik yang mengusungnya, bukan sebagai wali ataupun sebagai utusan. Setelah wakil rakyat dipilih oleh pemilihnya, maka lepaslah hubungannya dengan pemilihnya dan mulailah hubungannya dengan partai politik yang mencalonkan dalam pemilu. Hubungan partisan akan menjadi belenggu bagi wakil rakyat yang benar-benar ingin menyuarakan aspirasi rakyat yang diwakilinya, manakala hal itu berseberangan dengan kebijakan partai politiknya. Ini sudah beberapa kali diajukan ke Mahkamah Konstitusi tentang PAW gitu, atau recall terhadap anggota partai politik, dan kemarin juga diajukan lagi ke MK permohonan supaya masyarakat itu atau pemilih itu punya kekuasaan untuk melakukan PAW atau recall gitu ya. Tapi MK sudah mengatakan itu adalah kewenangan partai politik gitu ya. Jadi rakyat nggak bisa untuk punya daya meminta supaya wakil rakyatnya jangan di-recall atau wakil rakyatnya yang lain itu harus direkol gitu, karena dipertahankan oleh partainya. Sebenarnya kalau itu bisa lanjut menarik gitu ya, karena akan mengulik dominasi partai politik dalam hal persoalan recall. Hubungan partisan tersebut menjadi belenggu gitu ya, sehingga dalam posisi yang demikian seolah terjadi gap antara wakil rakyat dengan pemilihnya, karena mereka nggak bebas lagi. Contohnya sudah ada ketika Ibu Lili Wahid dari PKB menang dengan suara terbanyak di Jawa Timur, kemudian dia menyeberang ke PDIP melawan Pak SBY waktu itu tentang kenaikan BBM. Kemudian beliau direkol atau dipecat atau di PAW dari PKB gitu ya. Nah, padahal menangnya dengan suara terbanyak gitu waktu itu. Itu menunjukkan betapa lemahnya pilihan rakyat di mata partai gitu ya. Karena partai punya kuasa yang lebih besar. Berikutnya. Nah, sekarang kontrol publik terhadap parlemen, lembaga perwakilan rakyat harus juga dikontrol oleh rakyat. Parlemen memang tidak bertindak sebagai watchman terhadap pemerintah, tetapi watchman juga harus diawasi oleh rakyat sendiri sebagai pihak yang memberi mandat kepada wakil rakyat itu untuk bekerja atas nama mereka. Kekuasaan para wakil rakyat bersumber dan berasal dari rakyat, sehingga dapat diambil kembali oleh rakyat apabila rakyat tidak puas dengan kinerja mereka dalam memperjuangkan kepentingan rakyat. Ini salah satu argumen yang disusun oleh pemohon kemarin di Mahkamah Konstitusi, dan baru minggu kemarin diputus oleh MK gitu ya. Berikutnya, nah kontrol publik terhadap parlemen atau anggota lembaga perwakilan rakyat itu dapat dilakukan melalui pemilu. Itu cara paling elegan. Kita kalau nggak suka dengan wakil rakyat yang kinerjanya buruk, ya jangan dipilih lagi gitu kan. Pilih yang lebih baik gitu ya. Yang kedua, melalui media massa. Kita bisa membangun opini di media massa untuk mengkritisi bagaimana wakil rakyat atau parlemen itu bersikap atau kinerjanya seperti apa. Sistem recalling anggota parlemen, yaitu tadi yang saya contohkan dengan PAW tadi, pembubaran parlemen dan percepatan pemilu, ini pernah terjadi zaman Gus Dur tapi mudah-mudahan nggak ada terjadi lagi. kemudian unjuk pendapat secara lisan dalam persidangan parlemen, unjuk pendapat secara tertulis yang diajukan kepada parlemen, dan unjuk rasa melalui demonstrasi dan lain-lain. Nah sekarang mahasiswa di S1 itu sudah setiap tahun mereka hadir ke parlemen membawa semacam naskah kajian akademik gitu ya, yang tahun kemarin tentang mafia tanah, yang hari ini kalau nggak salah tentang pajak karbon. Jadi itu mungkin cara kita memberikan masukan kepada parlemen yang lebih konstruktif gitu ya. Efektif tidaknya apa yang diperjuangkan sangat ditentukan sejauh mana wakil rakyat sungguh-sungguh memperjuangkan kepentingan rakyat yang diwakili itu. Nah, mekanisme pemilu dipercaya sebagai cara paling efektif dan elegan dalam melakukan rotasi kepemimpinan politik dan perwujudan perwakilan formal di parlemen maupun pemerintahan dibandingkan dengan cara-cara yang lain. Ini mungkin pemantik diskusi dari saya, kurang lebihnya mohon maaf. Makasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much for Professor Nikmatul Huda. Let's give applause for her. I will try to conclude overall of the delivering material from Professor Nikmatul Huda. Professor Nikmatul Huda deliver about this freedom of speech and decreasing trust toward legislator in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have House of Representative, but the House of Representative not represent the people of Indonesia, but represent the political parties. So we can call them political parties officials, yeah. Because the idea from the people do not align with the idea that discussed by House of Representative. So the second, this give the effect to public distrust to legislator, even in corruption and democracy perception index Indonesia being stagnant, even in current years, this is the lowest index of corruption and democracy in Indonesia. And in Indonesia also, there is democracy backsliding because the president give an intervention to the other power, to the legislative and executive power. Even president, the power also, we can buy the court in Indonesia, or even by the social media, and consolidate the judges in Indonesia to win the judicial. So even though human right in Indonesia guaranteed in constitution, but the implementation of human right is still not aligned with the constitution, because in Indonesia there is also in current year silencing activists, the activists that they are providing they want to provide the constitution, but they being catched by government. So there is a gap between people and House of Representative. In the theory, we divide two representation. The first is representation in presence and representation in idea. So we want to make the representation, or we want to erase the gap to become representation in idea in House of Representative. So Professor Nikmatul Huda also reveals the relation between House of Representative and people. We recommend to give the mechanism to recall House of Representative, not only by political parties, but also by people immediately. by people immediately. So maybe we can discuss it in the question and answer session. So there is also the right to impeach for parliament, how to control public, how to control parliament from the public. So they are the point that revealed by Professor Nikmatul Huda. Professor Nikmatul Huda give us the guidance to discuss it in this conference about the relation between House of Representatives and people. So we will continue to the next speaker. We will hear from the Professor Ildiko Barta around 10 and 15 minutes ago. Okay, please, Prof. Ildiko, times is yours.
Thank you. Can I see the slides? Slides, okay. Thank you very much, and thank you the organizers for this opportunity being here. It's a great pleasure to share our doubts about this topic, which is the role of the state in guaranteeing freedom of speech in digital era in the European Union. So I would like to talk about some recent problem which was raised in the digital internal market in the European Union and highlight some conflicts of fundamental rights, especially the conflicts between the freedom of speech and other fundamental rights. Could you please go to the next slide? Thank you very much. First, you can see the most fundamental document which grants the fundamental rights to be protected in the European Union. This is the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. In the following, I will only refer to this charter as EU Charter or EU Fundamental Rights Charter. This is one of the primary legal sources of the European Union. It has a binding legal nature, which means that it obliges the European Union member states and the European Union institutions, which means that the European Union institutions can adopt only such legal acts which comply with the fundamental rights granted by the Charter. It is also important to emphasize that the EU Charter and the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice based on the rights of the Charter is very much following the jurisdiction of the European Court of Fundamental Rights. So these two case law is very close to each other, but it is important to emphasize that this Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union is a fundamental rights charter of an economic organization. This means that many fundamental rights program is raised by such problem which is connected to the functioning of the internal market, trade between member states, economic rights. That's why this is a specific regime. And it is also important to emphasize that when interpreting the Charter's right by courts, this economic background also very much influences the interpretation of the scope of such rights. And it is also important to emphasize that when it comes to a conflict between fundamental rights protected by the Charter, this conflict also often have economic nature. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. You can see the scope of freedom of expression and information as protected by the EU Fundamental Right Charter. at first sight, this is similar to as the freedom of expression or freedom of speech is protected by constitutions of the European Union member states or any other international human rights charter. Please go to the next slide. Here, I would like to show you two further relevant legislative acts in the European Union, which will be also significant from the point of view of freedom of speech in the digital era. The one is the so-called Digital Services Act, which is applicable only from 2024. I don't know whether it is visible or not, but the text which showing on the title of this legislative act suggests that the main objective of this Digital Services Act to highlight the risks of consumer protection, of data protection, which can be raised by the functioning of the digital services of digital platforms. And the most important objective of this Digital Services Act to protect consumers, protect data of consumers in the digital world. And so the main objective is consumer protection, but this can be in conflict with the freedom of speech. I will highlight it in more details soon. And the other act is the so-called European Media Freedom Act, which is about indeed about free speech and ensuring the right of freedom of expression, freedom of information in relation to the services of large digital media providers in the who are operating in the European Union and who provide digital services, provide digital news in the European internal market. Please, next slide, please. Here you can see the approach of certain European institutions to the freedom of expression. I don't want to go to the details. I just wanted to highlight with citing certain important texts from the communication and the case law of these institutions. The first is the one judgment of the Court of Justice of the European Union. Here you can find highlighted that the right to freedom of expression is understood broadly, and it is highlighted that it is relevant to all communication methods, also including communication that can shocking or even disturbing. Please, next slide. And here is another institution of the European Union. This is one of the main legislators in the EU, the Council of the European Union, which consists of ministerial representatives of the European member states. Here it is highlighted that the freedom of speech must also be protected online. So as you can see, the approach of the European institution that the free speech must given a high level of protection, but you will also see, based on next slides, that it is not so easy to grant it in the digital era. Why? Go to the next slide, please. Here, first, I would like to talk about, before going into details of the main challenges, I would like to highlight the member state, the specific responsibilities of the member states of the European Union. It is generally said in constitutional legal literature that the state has a dual role when it comes to the freedom of speech. it on the one hand has a negative obligation. It must first of all refrain from unjustified interference in the freedom of speech. On the other hand, sorry, please go back. On the other hand, it must create a regulatory framework, so it is a positive obligation to create an appropriate regulatory framework to grant the freedom of speech. And a specific question that I would like to raise here, that how this negative and positive dual role is shared between the European Union and member states as two levels of governance in the European Union, and that what specific problem might arise in the digital era. Generally, I would like to say that the member states, when it comes to a legislative act from the European Union institutions, the member states on the one hand need to ensure the conformity of this act. So, for example, revise those already existing legislative acts which are in conflict with the new European Union Act. And on the other hand, they, in certain cases, they also need to implement these acts. So now go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Let's see first the challenges which are raised by the obligation imposed by the Digital Services Act on the so-called very large online platforms and very large online search engines. So this is the Digital Services Act that I mentioned before as one of the first, one of the most important secondary legislative acts of the European Union. And the next problem that I would like to raise will be potential problems between the rights to be protected as regards protection of personal data and the freedom of expression. Please go to the next slides. Let's see the first problem. When it comes to the obligation of large online service providers, it is this first obligation which is imposed by this Digital Services Act is to remove or restrict access to illegal content. And the other obligation is a so-called systemic risk mitigation. Let's see the first one on the next slide. Here, just to show you that who are these so-called largest digital, very large online platform and very large online searching engines. Here you can see on the left that who are they. You can see that the majority of them are United States-based providers who are also present in the European Union's digital market. So this is interesting in the European Union system that they are US-based, but due to the fact that they are present in the European Union internal market as a service provider, they are also obliged by the EU rule. It often is a source of conflict. Please go to the next slide. One of the challenge is this content moderation policy and obligation of this Digital Services Act that I mentioned before, that these very large online platforms and searching engines are obliged to remove the so-called illegal content. One of the problem, please go to the next slide to show it. One of the problem is that the illegal content is defined in the Digital Services Act in the way, as you can see here. It is a very, very vague definition. It is mostly the responsibility of the national competent authorities to define the concept of illegal content. And as you can see, the Digital Services Act also has a recital which gives an interpretation guidelines, which is that these illegal content should be defined broadly. Please go to the next slide. Why it is a problem? On the one hand, it is a problem because if they are defined broadly, it can be a risk for the freedom of speech. Because if the illegal content is defined broadly, it can also has the consequence that those contents are also categorized as illegal, which are not illegal and which are indeed not risky for public health or public order or something like this. Only they are illegal at the first sight. And this is even more the risk that they are badly categorized because as you can see, the Digital Services Act also make it possible for individual users who are not experts of illegal content that they can flag the content when they read which are accessible by this very large searching engine, for example, by Google. So if there are many individual non-expert users who flag as illegal, it can be the consequence that the very large platforms and searching engine will have a fear of flagging, and therefore they will also remove such contents which are not illegal. So therefore it is a restriction, an unnecessary restriction of the freedom of speech. Please go to the next slide. The other what I wanted to highlight is the controversial nature of systemic risk mitigation, which is also provided in the Digital Services Act. It is more than the ad hoc removal of individual content. It is a monitoring system against the potential harmful content, which can be harmful on electoral processes, public health, public discourse, and so on. Please go to the next slide. Here you can see a second problem that I would like to highlight in this context, the potential conflict between personal data protection and freedom of speech. As you can see in the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, there is a separate provision for the granting the protection of personal data. And please go to the next slide. I just would like to summarize very briefly that what is the problem. Here the problem was that the two applicants were the subject of published articles published in digital newspapers. These newspapers wrote about the lifestyle of these applicants, that it is a luxury lifestyle, and these applicants were also company leaders. The articles also criticized the investment model of this company, which were led by these company leaders. And the problem which was raised by the case briefly was that what is the obligation of the very large search engine, which was here the Google searching engine. Because the applicants requested the Google to dereferencing the article, which means removal all the links and or the thumbnails which leads to the original articles. This is the so-called right to erasure of data subject, which is granted by this before mentioned Article 8 of the Fundamental Charter. And so one right is, on the one hand, the right of erasure based on the personal data protection. The other conflicting right is the freedom of speech of this digital newspaper. And now the question is that what is the primary obligation of Google? To ensure the freedom of speech for digital newspaper, or to ensure the personal data protection? Please go to the next slide. So here you can see the map of this conflicting rights. And please go to the next slide. The finding of the Court of Justice of the European Union, briefly summarized, is to consider specifically the impression of the thumbnails and the content of the links on the readers, and to keep a balance between the two fundamental rights. But please go to the conclusion in lack of time. So please go to the next slide. And again the next, until the conclusion is reached. Okay, thank you. So the main lessons that, according to my opinion, we can learn from that case is that personal data protection and the protection of privacy and security is now a highlighted interest in the European Union. It is connected to the high consumer protection standard of the European Union. And when it has a priority, then it is very, very difficult to grant an equal protection to the freedom of speech. In this Google-related case, the European Court of Justice seems to prioritize the personal data protection, and it was less highlighted the interest rising from the freedom of speech. And so I would say that the risks of digital era, this new risk, can influence the level of protection of freedom of speech, potentially in a negative way, even leading to potential conflict between EU acts themselves, because it would be another subject, but it could also lead potentially conflict between the before mentioned Digital Services Act and EU Media Freedom Act, so between two acts themselves. And this approach primarily infringes, I think, the interest of EU-based digital giants that I indicated before, Google and Facebook and so on, because they have the most important interest for the freedom of speech in such cases. So we will see what kind of other challenges will raised by future cases, but now this is the way as I would summarize the situation in the European Union. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for Professor Ildiko Mperta for the explanation, insightful explanation about the role of the state in guaranteeing freedom of speech in digital era and in the European Union. From Europe, we will fly to Malaysia, yeah, and now we are in Malaysia. So, Professor Ida, are you there and with us?
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
Can I share my own slides, or are you handling my slides?
Yeah, please share yourself. We will make you as co-host.
Okay, let me try.
Okay.
It's still disabled here. It's still disabled.
Yeah, it's Mas Gelar. So you can try, Prof. Ida.
Okay.
It's still disabled or? Okay.
Can you see the slides now?
Yeah, we can see the slides.
Sorry. It appears very small on my screen. And it has gone. Okay. How do I do this? Can't seem to control from here. It has gone to the last slides.
You can zoom out the PPT.
Try this one, screen to share. Zoom out of the PPT, go out, go out.
Okay, or we can help, we will help you to share the slides.
Right. All right, okay.
Okay, while the 10 until 15 minutes, you can begin the presentation.
Is that working? Is that working?
Are you send the PPT to the committee?
Yes, I did. Okay.
Yeah, we will help you.
Go ahead. Yeah, much easier.
Okay.
Yeah. Stop share.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me for this IP Colloquium, or PG Colloquium. I am honored to be here today, and I am sorry I am not here in person today because of my commitment in the university. Now, I note that the theme for this PG Colloquium is navigating the crossroads, law, democracy, and human rights in a shifting global landscape. My message to the members of the Colloquium is that very simple. In the morning, I've listened to a very well speech on constitutional law, and just now I heard a very excellent speech on freedom of expression. So my message for this colloquium is very simple. The topic given to me is intellectual property rights for the prosperity of the people in Malaysia. So what I will do is I will highlight areas in which intellectual property rights can give benefit to the people of Malaysia and increase the prosperity of the people in Malaysia on three levels: at the individual level, individual business level, at the country level, as well as at the regional level. Next, please. Now, this is basically the outline of my presentation, and I know I have only 15 minutes, so I can skip a lot of slides, and that was the reason why I want to share the slides myself, because there were a number of slides that I want to skip. Now, let's start with the beginning. What is intellectual property? Now, intellectual property has been given many definitions depending on how you look at it. Legally, it refers to the creations of the mind. Next, please. It refers to the creations of mind, everything from the works of art to inventions, computer programs, to trademarks and other commercial signs. If you look at the various types of intellectual property, next please, that is protected under the existing intellectual property law in most parts of the world, you will note that it covers, from simple trademark, patent, copyright, industrial design, integrated circuit layout, as well as geographical indication and trade secrets. Next, please. Next, please. This is just an illustration of what intellectual property comprises of, and you find that for a single product, they may be consisting of more than one intellectual property. Now, intellectual property is very much a creation of statutes of the parliament, and in Malaysia, we have in front of us 6 statutes that relates to intellectual property. Next, please. And this is very similar in other parts of the world, as well as the world become members to WIPO treaties as well as WTO TRIPS agreement. And if you find the journey in relation to intellectual property obligations, you'll find that it has gone quite far, and I think it is the same in Indonesia as we become members to many of these treaties that are negotiated at WIPO. Next, please. Which means that the obligation that we adhere to in relation to intellectual property rights has expanded by leaps and bounds. From the beginning, we accede to the WIPO agreements. Now, intellectual property has been used as a metric to measure a country's level of economic development and, of course, prosperity of trade and business in the particular country. This is just an illustration of the number of trademark applications in some of the countries. Next, please. And next, please. And this is a patent application. And, of course, at the individual business level, intellectual property helps a lot with business growth. And this is one example. Next, please. And next. How it helps with business growth. For example, in relation to trademark, it protects company's brand name, logo, and exclusive rights, and therefore you'd be able to maintain your business competitiveness as opposed to your competitor. Next, please. Next. And next. Now, with the kind of intellectual property that you develop and retain in your business, you'll be able to elevate yourself from a domestic player to a global halal powerhouse. And I like to make example of Indomie that has become a powerful international player in the trademark arena. Next, please. And next. And next. And next. Intellectual property gives commercialization opportunities for individual holders and small and medium enterprises. But not only that, even big players use intellectual properties to enhance their business practices, such as, using blockchain and etc. Next, please. And with intellectual property, you'll be able to distinguish brand from other competitors, and you'll be able to stop your competitors from copying your product. Next, please. Next, and next, and next. Now, on those 4 points, you'll find that intellectual property are very useful for individual business. But at the country's level or national level, intellectual property is important for countries to leverage and new technologies and advanced technologies. For example, in relation to digital economy. Now, Indonesia, for example, has released its initiative to become an AI nation by 2045, and your aspiration is known as Golden Indo 2045. Malaysia, for example, is aiming to be an AI nation in 2030. So, in order to strategize ourselves in this digital economy, it is very important for us to embrace intellectual property to the fullest. Next, please. Digital economy is defined as economic and social activities that involve the production and use of digital economy by individuals, businesses, and government. Now, this digital economy took us by surprise, particularly because of COVID-19. You find that COVID-19 has forced us to transform our businesses and activities into an online environment. And, we end up shopping, talking to people like this conference here through networking. And this gives rise to new business models and give rise to, next please, to e-commerce platforms. And these e-commerce platforms, next please, definitely will thrive using intellectual property. So much so that at the ASEAN level, if you look at ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint in 2025, it has highlighted intellectual property as the stimulus to the growth of a country's economy. Now, if you look at it, it says, in principle, intellectual property policy can serve as a powerful stimulus to cultural, intellectual, and artistic creativity and their commercialization, efficient adoption and adaptation of more advanced technologies, and continuous learning to meet the ever-rising threshold of performance expectations. So you'll find that intellectual property become more and more important as we advance ourselves in this digital economy, as we want to excel ourselves not only at individual business level, but also at a country's level. Next, please. Now, the role of industrial property in encouraging the adoption of new technologies, as well as the evolution of new technologies itself, is not something new. I always like to quote this book by David Llewellyn, my professor from London, where he talks about invisible gold in Asia, creating wealth through intellectual property. And when he described gold here, he's not talking about the physical gold, but he's talking about all the ideas and innovations that were, developed in Asia. The fact that actually in this part of the world, we have created a lot of intellectual property, useful ideas and innovations that if we leverage on it properly, it will then bring us or leapfrog us to higher economic development. And this is something that we cannot run away from, because, in the 21st century, world competition will revolve around intellectual property rights, not only in terms of the creation, but also in terms of its protection as well as enforcement. You look at technologies that you can find in Asia and how that has created wealth, not only to the individual businesses, but also to the country at large. Next, please. So much so that there are many reports in other parts of the world on how to enhance our competitiveness in this digital economy. There was an old report by Professor Ian Hargreaves in 2011 that basically highlights how important it is, intellectual property, and how the existing IP framework, which is developed in a physical world, has fallen behind and must adapt. And therefore, we must always revisit our intellectual property policies to ensure that it is adapt to support digital economy. And I must say that Malaysia and Indonesia has done quite a bit, to revise their IP laws to adapt to the digital economy. Next, please. So, in terms of the frontier technologies, next, please, you find that, that's where the projected economic growth is. And if we were to, increase our competitiveness again in this digital economy, we would have to embrace IP to the fullest and revise and refine it to adapt to digital economy. Next, please. Next, please. And these are some of the e-commerce platforms that you can find in this part of the world, and you find that, intellectual property is very important to their business models. Thank you. Next, please. Next, please. Right, the trends on high technologies and devices are reported in many, many reports, right? You can find in WIPO, Technology Trends 2019, next please, that basically shows the increase of IP protection and IP filing on new digital revolution. So as a country, we must increase investment in high technologies, and as we increase it, we must also refine and reshape our intellectual property so that these high technologies are protected to give prosperity to our country. Next, please. Next, please. You'll find that the move to reform intellectual property does not belong solely within the domain of domestic economy. At the international level, as well as the regional level, countries are forming free trade agreements, bilateral trade agreements, and multilateral trade agreements to ensure that there is a swift movement or transfer of trade between countries. And one of the precursors for trade, increase of trade between countries, is of course intellectual property. One example that I like to use is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, and an important multilateral agreement that consists of 10 ASEAN countries, including Malaysia and Indonesia, and the 5 countries, China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. And you'll find that this agreement is very important because among the top patent applicants in the world are there in this Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP agreement. Who are they? China, Japan, and South Korea, right? China is now the highest IP applicants in the world. Japan is number 3rd, and Korea number 4th. And they are all very large markets for technologies. And if we want to have access to these technologies, then we need to improve our IP standards. And this is reflected in our RCEP itself because it has one large chapter on intellectual property. Next, please. And you'll find that with this international treaty, it will enable tariff reductions and, most importantly, harmonized rules on intellectual property. And how would these harmonized rules benefit the country? All the countries that are members of this RCEP agreement is that with harmonized rules on intellectual property, it's much easier for high technologies to be traded between countries because there is no risk of these technologies of being copied or pirated by other countries. So RCEP particularly promotes greater transparency, information sharing, and standardization of rules. And next, please. And you'll find, in relation to intellectual property, what it does is it comes up with substantive, minimal provisions on all aspects of intellectual property, which include copyright, trademark, geographical indications, patents, industrial designs, genetic resources, unfair competition, enforcement of IPR, and cooperation and consultation. Now, why would I highlight RCEP particularly? The fact that many scholars alluded to RCEP as being quite balanced, right? Quite balanced. As you know that the economic development among the ASEAN countries are not of the same level. There are countries like Cambodia or Myanmar which are at the lower end, and of course there are, countries in the middle like Malaysia and Indonesia, right? So the way ASEAN works in intellectual property is not to come up with a common standards for everybody. Instead, it works towards helping with harmonization and cooperation and collaboration in the administration of intellectual property. And the other thing with RCEP is that it has specific provision on genetic resources, TK and folklore, something which is very, very dear to this part of the world, Malaysia and Indonesia included, right? And it has fairer exceptions, not only copyright, but also in trademarks. Next, please. And the most important thing is that it emphasizes on cooperation and collaboration among member countries in the world. Now, to tie up to the theme of the conference, which is navigating the crossroads law, democracy and human rights in a shifting global landscape, you'll find that intellectual property has a rise to become an important right for the people of the country. Important right for the people of Indonesia, important right for the people of Malaysia, because they need to protect their business, right? They need to protect their business and they need to stop their competitors from riding on them. And it is also an important human right in a sense that it has to provide a balance between private interest and public interest. And you find this to be clearly manifested in the exceptions in relation to fair use, for example, right? And of course, the specific recognition of genetic resources and traditional cultural expression alludes to the fact that the countries with mega diverse bioresources will have rights over these biological resources, right? So it's recognizing their rights over their important genetic resources. And on top of that, the fact that it has transitional provisions also allude to the fact that these are important rights which are needed for countries with lesser economic development, that they need more hand-holding with respect to their intellectual property standards. And the emphasis on cooperation and collaboration even alludes to that the most, right? So in a way, intellectual property is, whether we like it or not, in this 21st century has become a very important, a very important role or factor to not only drive the prosperity of businesses at the individual level, but it is also important at the national level, because it becomes a metric to determine whether a particular country has reached a certain level of economic development or not. And thirdly, at the regional level, intellectual property is equally important, because standards of intellectual property will determine the cross-border trade on technological goods. And as we are in this digital economy, technological goods are very, very important for our day-to-day lives, and therefore, intellectual property is important on not only at the individual level, but also at the regional and national level. With that, I end on my presentation. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so much for Professor Ida for the interesting explanation about intellectual property right for prosperity of the people, especially in the growth of economy. So, from the Malaysia, we will go to Nigeria. So please, Associate Professor Dr. Kabiru Adamu will talk about the human rights, governance, and the rule of law in contemporary Nigeria. So, time is yours, around 10 until 5 minutes.
For inviting me to this important colloquium. My discussion is about Nigeria. You know, Nigeria is one of the most populous countries in the world. And it is one of the most important countries when it comes to the practice of democracy in Africa. Nigeria has experienced different type of system of government, from military government to civilian form of government. So naturally, this raises issues and concerns relating to rule of law and relating to human rights. So my paper will attempt to tell us whether there is rule of law in Nigeria, what are the challenges to the practice of rule of law in Nigeria. My paper again will discuss the issues relating to human rights. Do we have human rights in Nigeria? How are they protected? How are they practiced? What are the challenges to the practice of human rights in Nigeria? So that's the essence of the paper. Next slide, please. Next slide. So, next slide again. Next slide. So this is just a little bit information about myself. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. So this is just an abstract. It gives you a glimpse of what to expect from the paper and the findings of the paper. So I will start by saying that I have like 57 slides. So 15 minutes will not be enough for me to go all over the slides. So I will try to summarize. So next slide, please. So these are the aims and objectives of the paper, to just give you an idea about how rule of law is practiced, then the meaning of rule of law, issues relating to the nexus, the connection between rule of law, human rights, and governance, and issues relating to the challenges that rule of law and human rights are facing in the country. And you see the findings of the paper at the end of it. Next slide. So these are the learning outcomes from the paper. So listeners will learn a lot of things when they see the paper in full. But most important thing is for us to share an idea about how Nigeria practice rule of law and human rights. Next slide. So we have to begin the discussion by going back to theory. Theory in the sense that what is rule of law, what is human rights, and how are they applied in contemporary Nigeria. So basically, we can say every community requires laws for the protection of the rights of its people, for the safety and well-being of its people. These laws regulate their actions, the conduct and behaviors of not only individuals, but government also. Because if you give too much power to government, then there's a tendency that governments and its agencies are going to violate that power. So recent events in Nigeria will tell you that there is the need to study issues relating to human rights and rule of law, especially because of recent, we had issues relating to protests. People came out to protest against bad governance in Nigeria, against police brutality, against hunger. Then currently Nigeria is facing serious insecurity issues relating to its insurgency by the Boko Haram elements, relating to some type of organizations that want to break off from Nigeria, which we call IPOP. Then if you care to follow international news of recent, students were kidnapped from some schools. This all try to give you an idea there is a problem in Nigeria relating to human rights. So the paper will try to highlight some of these issues and connect them and see how we can make suggestions to improve these issues. The next slide, please. So next slide. So what I try to do in this respect is to try to trace back the idea behind the concept of rule of law and human rights. So if you go to the next slide, we try to identify the meaning of rule of law. What is the rule of law? For you to understand that, you have to go back to history, you have to go back to the idea of philosophers, an idea of given by writers on the meaning of rule of law. I said rule of law by origin comes from the notion that the possession of coercive powers by government, if it is left unchecked, may lead to oppression of individuals by the government, meaning government will use so much power to oppress individuals. So this idea about rule of law, you can get it from some of the philosophers in Greece, Greek philosophers, like Aristotle. Go to the next slide, please. So Aristotle, Bracton, Albert Dicey, Frederick Hayek, and Harry Jones have written about rule of law. So for instance, if you look at the views of Aristotle, he said rule of law simply means that a law should supersede the whims and caprices of the king, meaning there should be something above the king, that the king should not be the alpha and the omega in the society. He too, he should be subjected to the law. So if you look at the view of Harry Bracton, who wrote in the 13th century, he said, the world should not be the world should be governed by law, human or divine. So it means that the world should not be governed by the king, because if you give too much power to the king, then he can do a lot of things to the individuals. Next slide, please. So in modern times, we can see rule of law can be interpreted from the idea of Magna Carta, which laid the foundation of democracy and how law should thrive over arbitrariness of government. Next slide, please. So if you look at the slide, Magna Carta in modern history was signed in 1215, and it became the foundation of rule of law. It established a lot of principles that the sovereigns are not above the law. they are equally subjects of the law. So it established and guaranteed rights for people. Then it laid the foundation of the principles of equality, that everybody is equal before the law. And it shaped and influenced our modern system of government and constitution, which upheld basic human rights and liberties. Next slide, please. So now the question is, what is the simple meaning of rule of law? For us to understand that, we have to go back to the idea of Albert Dicey. So he itemized some principles which shows the meaning of rule of law. For instance, he said the first meaning of rule of law is that there is the absolute supremacy of the law, as opposed to the influence of arbitrary power. So to him, there is the need to have dominance of regular law, as opposed to any arbitrary use of power. Then next slide, please. That is the first meaning of rule of law. So if we interpret this, it means that the rights of individuals should be protected, individuals should be given civil liberties, government should not constrain the freedom of individuals, no one should be punished unless in accordance with the law. So next slide, please. So the second meaning of rule of law, according to AC Dicey, is it means equality before the law. Everybody is equal before the law. No one is supreme and no one is inferior. So, meaning that all people should be subjected to the same ordinary laws of the land before the courts. So next slide, please. So he has a third meaning for rule of law, that no one should be punished unless and until it is in accordance with the law. His property should not be taken away, because if you do so, then you are using arbitrary power. So based on the meaning given by Dicey, rule of law is a formula which should be expressed through positive law, that is the Constitution. And from what he said, there should be a form of code in which those rights are protected or enshrined. And in most cases, this is what we have in our modern constitutions. Next slide, please. So that's the interpretive meaning of rule of law according to Dicey, in the third meaning. Next slide, please. So now, simply, if you look at all those quotations and ideas, what is rule of law? One, it is the supremacy of the law over all persons. Number two, government and leaders and authorities must justify their actions in line with the law. Then government should be conducted within the framework of rules and principles. Number four, courts should be respected, should be given the independent power to prevent abuse. Then lastly, human rights and civil liberties should be protected against arbitrary government. So this is the simple meaning of rule of law. So the question is, do we have this in Nigeria? Next slide. Okay, next slide. So this is just a repetition of the meaning of rule of law according to what we just discussed. Freedom of the individual, supremacy of the law, equality before the law, then most important thing, especially in modern society, a free and courageous independent press. Next slide. Okay, so in this slide, I try to show the link, the connection between rule of law and human rights, that you cannot enjoy human rights without rule of law. So they are so interconnected that you cannot separate the two. And there is the need to ensure that these rights are protected through positive laws, through codification, especially in a constitution or Bill of Rights. Next slide. Okay, so now, what are human rights? Human rights are rights that are given by God. They are not given by individuals, they are not given by the government. So they are universal in the sense that anywhere you go, you see them. If you go to Hungary, you see them. If you come to Nigeria, if you go to Indonesia, they are always there. Then they should be guaranteed and protected by the government through laws. Then when they are violated, they should be enforced against all persons, whether the states or whether authorities. So next slide, please. So now, Nigeria as a country, does it have rule of law? Does it have human rights? How are they protected? But for that, we need to know a little bit history about Nigeria. So Nigeria is a country in the West African sub-region. It was colonized by Britain. The British government came and introduced English law as part of our legal system. So it was created out of political and economic necessity for the benefit of the British. So next slide, please. So Nigeria now is, like I said from the beginning, is one of the most populous countries in the world. So it is a republic. It has a system of democracy. Leaders are elected, not imposed on the people. It has a federal system of government. You have states, then you have a federal government. So that's the history. We have a constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. Most of issues relating to rule of law and human rights have been incorporated in the constitution. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, we have a system of government whereby we have the president, who is the head of government. We have a legislative house that make laws. Then we have an independent judiciary. Then at the state level, it's a replica of what is at the federal level. You have a governor, you have a state house of assembly, then you have the court system. So next slide, please. So this is a little bit history about the population, our culture, and religion. Currently, they said we are about 236 million in terms of population. That's to show you that we are many. So we have the three most dominant ethnic groups, the Hausas, the Yorubas, and the Igbos. Next slide. So, how is rule of law designed in Nigeria? One, it is designed in such a way that it has been incorporated into the Constitution. The Constitution we have now is the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended. That particular Constitution contains issues relating to rule of law. One, there is equality before the law. Everyone is equal. Number two, the Constitution established independent courts, meaning these courts are not controlled by the executive. They have the power and freedom to interpret the law the way it is. Then, like I said, government is elected and not appointed. Next slide. Okay. So, Nigeria has history of somehow recognizing and codifying human rights and rule of law. Nigeria is a signatory to a lot of international conventions. For instance, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, Nigeria is a signatory. It's also a signatory to the regional human rights protection law, that is the Banjul Charter. Then we have tried to codify some of the issues relating to human rights protection through our local laws. For instance, we did that through the African Charter on Human and People's Rights Ratification and Enforcement Act. Then we have rules relating to enforcement of fundamental human rights that were made in 1999. So this is how rule of law and human rights have been designed and incorporated into our laws. Next slide. Okay. So looking at specific issues relating to rule of law. One, we have supremacy of the law. And this has been pronounced by the Constitution itself. The Constitution under Section 1 says that the laws of the land in Nigeria are supreme over individuals, over government. and Nigeria should be governed under rule of law. Then the system of governance in Nigeria should be democratic, like I said, and this has been also enshrined under Section 1, sub 3 of the Constitution and Section 14 of the Constitution, all of Nigeria. Next slide. Okay, so how do we observe human rights and rule of law in Nigeria? We do that through these various means. One, we have independent judiciary that were created by Section 6 of the Constitution. Secondly, there is this issue of fair hearing and freedom of expression. People have the right to say what they want, insofar they have not violated the law, and that is under Section 36 of the Constitution. Then human rights are protected and recognized under the Constitution. The next slide will tell us what kind of human rights are protected by the law. So we practice democracy, we recognize fair hearing, and civil liberties are also protected. Next slide. Okay, so what are the rights, human rights protected under the rule of law in Nigeria? Right to life. Everybody has the right to his own life, protected by Section 33 of the Constitution. Right to human dignity and freedom from torture. The right to personal liberty. People have the right to move freely without any restriction under Section 35. Right to freedom of expression and religion. People have the right to practice any religion that they want under Section 38, 39. Then right to freedom of assembly and association, equally protected under Section 40. Right to freedom. People cannot be discriminated on either grounds. So, and the right to own property anywhere in the country. So these are the human rights recognized and protected by our law. Next slide, please. Okay, so I try to differentiate between rights that are fundamental and rights that are egalitarian. There is reason for this, because fundamental rights in Nigeria can be enforced against the government, whereas egalitarian rights are those economic and social rights. So naturally, the Constitution of Nigeria did not give power to individuals to enforce those rights against the government. So what are they? I mentioned them. Some have to do with quality education, issues relating to security, then issues relating to obligation of government to protect the environment, right to social justice. All these are egalitarian rights, and no citizen has the right to enforce them against the government. So if the government does not somehow improve this, then there is no way you can sue the government to enforce the rights. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, over the years, Nigerian courts have demonstrated independence in line with the principles of rule of law. So how? For instance, the courts will never judge somebody unless he is hurt, based on the principle that you should always give people the right to fair hearing. Then number two, no one should be a judge in his own case. If government has interest in a particular case, they cannot be the accuser, they cannot be the decider of that particular case. All in line with the principles of rule of law. Next slide. 1 minute more, okay. So let me try to go to the third to last slide, please. Go over the slides. So this to tell you how rule of law is practiced through the cases. Next slide. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Next slide. Okay, so now, currently, what are the issues relating to challenges of rule of law in Nigeria? So, I tried to demonstrate this through analysis of the recent events in Nigeria. One has to do with protest. The other one has to do with the rights of citizens before the courts. So if you look at this particular slide, that was a protest in Lagos, and many people were killed during that particular protest. People came out to protest against police brutality. But in the process, the police used serious force to kill a lot of innocent protesters. So these are some of the challenges that we face when it comes to rule of law in Nigeria. That the laws are there in theory, but in practice, they are not really upheld. Next slide, please. So this has to do with another youth protest in Nigeria. Next slide. Next slide. So, of interest is the issue of rule of law when it comes to enforcement against individuals and government. In this particular slide, it has to do with children that were arrested, young children who are not of age and were brought before the court. And there were a lot of issues that were highlighted that they ought to be taken to juvenile courts, not to normal courts. And the government was not really interested in doing so. Why? Because this issue has to do with bad governance. Government was thinking that there will be, it will be toppled, that democracy will die in Nigeria. So because of that, they took the children to the courts in order to enforce the law, which was a really violation of the principles of rule of law and human rights in Nigeria. So last slide. So these are my conclusion, that there is rule of law in Nigeria, but we face a lot of challenges that has to do with implementation and enforcement. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. So these are my recommendations, that there is the need to improve rule of law. There is the need to understudy other countries to see how they practice their rule of law. Finally, next slide. So these are my own conclusion, and I look forward to listening to other ideas on how to improve rule of law in Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for Dr. Kabiru for the interesting explanation about Nigeria. Alhamdulillah, everyone, we have traveled across country from Indonesia, Europe, Malaysia, and the last Nigeria. So we want to move to the second session. It is question and answer, and we have prepared 3 best question and answer for the gift, yeah. So please tell your name at first and go to the question or the statement point, and the last, please address with who do you want to answer. So please, is there any question or statement from you? Okay, maybe I will take from every side, yeah. For the first, this side, so this for the representative from the girl, and from the representative from the Nigeria, maybe this one, yeah. Okay, the girl one, okay, and the last, yeah, this one, the girl. Yeah, the girl. Okay, the first, please. Tell your name, go to the question immediately, yeah. Don't be the 5 speaker.
Okay.
And tell, who do you want to answer?
Tes. Oke, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Nada Julia Nugraha, and I'm from 2025's batch of International Study Program, studying law at Faculty of Law of Universitas Islam Indonesia. And it's such a pleasure to be here in front of great speaker that keep inspiring me to continue my path in law school. And I specifically want to ask a few questions to Professor Ildiko Bartha regarding her presentation that make me eager to know the answer. So, as you mentioned earlier, Europe highly protection, privacy, and also security. I took an interesting conclusion on EU Fundamental Rights Charter Article 8. It implied that data protection and freedom of speech in EU are aligned or even intersect with each other. Court of Justice of the European Union also mentioned that the right of freedom of expression is an indispensable cornerstone of an open and democratic society, relevant to all communication that disturb, shock, and offend. Hence, my questions are: what is the limit of the right of freedom expression in EU until it can be considered as an act of violation against the existing law, in offline or even in online platform? And also the second question, and when the law got violated, how does the rules oftentimes works in protecting someone's personal data under the guidance of Court of Justice of European Union or the legal enforcer? Because as I said earlier, EU clearly has rules that even measures all the communication that disturbs, shock, and or offend is relevant. Because in Indonesia, a freedom of speech as presented in Prof. Nikmatul Huda material is almost like fictional, because the states often silence or threaten the activists immediately, accusing them of promoting hate speech against the government, felony, or etc. Thank you. That's my question.
Thank you. Your name? Please tell me in slowly.
Nanda Julianugraha.
Oh, Nanda. Okay, thank you, Nanda. Yeah, the next question, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
I really commend the presenters, especially my teacher from Nigeria. I am really very, very happy to see him.
Yes, the question for me? No.
No, Prof. It is for Dr. Kabiru.
Dr. Kabir, yeah. So I have two questions for Dr. Kabir.
Can you raise your voice? Okay.
I think it is the mic.
Oh, the mic.
Yeah.
Okay.
The first question is with regards to the constitutional provisions regarding the egalitarian rights that you've mentioned. I think we have some rights that can be enforced and some cannot be enforced. So what can you say, or what advice can you give? How can we indirectly enforce the egalitarian rights against government without having to amend the constitutional provisions? How can we actually do that? And secondly, you also talk about the security issues going on in Nigeria. And I've had so many recommendations going on, including the kinetic measures and non-kinetic. So my question is, what do you think about the non-kinetic measures to resolving kidnapping and abduction cases? These are the two questions for the gentleman. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. So the next.
Okay. My name is Amatullah Aziza and I'm from Islamic University of Indonesia. And my question is for Professor Ildiko and Professor Kabiru that but first of all, I will give you my statement first that I believe that the advancement of technology will always come with us, that the advancement of technology will keep going and will get along with us. And that is somehow a good thing for us as a human being. And for that, I believe that we cannot and we shouldn't stop the advancement of technology, including AI as well. So the thing is, Indonesia Constitutional Court has decided that in electoral campaign, the use of AI is prohibited. That because it can manipulate the appearance of the candidate. But I think, in my opinion, we can still using AI in electoral campaign by labeling the content that is made by AI, by give it a label that this is AI generated. So we can tell that it is made by AI and the message is still delivered to the voters well. And my question for the professor is, do you agree with this prohibition of the use of AI? And how does your country regulate the use of AI in electoral campaign? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Aziza. I will open one more from the person that want to ask for Prof. Ida Madiha. Okay, please. For Prof. Ida Madiha. Okay, no problem. Please give your question.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dewi Alfani Lumban Gaul from Universitas Prastia Mulia, and my question is to Professor Nikmatul Huda. As mentioned earlier, in Indonesia, the relationship between the people and their representative isn't what it's supposed to be. You also mentioned that we as voters should choose the better candidates on election day. But what if in reality, none of the available options are actually good? This then leads to another questions. Do we still even need representatives or even the parliament, DPR, in the first place? I understand that as a democratic country and to preserve the truest political system, representatives are supposed to hold an important role. But with the current situation, including of what was happened in last August this year, the big mass protests, and the public trust keeps declining and the quality of candidates doesn't seem to improve, isn't it reasonable for us to question whether the system is still relevant to the people and to Indonesia? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will close the opportunity for the question and answer. Maybe I will give the opportunity and the time for the first to Dr. Kabiru first to answer the question. Please, time yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Your question has to do with the differences between these fundamental rights and egalitarian rights and how they can be enforced in Nigeria, especially if you look at some of these egalitarian rights. Some are really important to our basic life, like education, protection of environment, and the rest. So I think, in my own opinion, the best way is through amendment of the law. If you need to enforce some of these rights, especially those that came under Chapter 2, then you need to amend the law to make them enforceable. So that is one. Number two, through judicial activism, meaning when opportunity comes for the court to decide these types of cases, there is a need for the courts to be proactive in ensuring that they metamorphosed into rights that can be enforced by law. Because in South Africa, they have similar experiences in which those rights, egalitarian rights, were now transformed into positive rights that you can enforce before the courts of law. So I think, in my own opinion, these are the best ways that you can enforce egalitarian rights. Either you change the constitution, amend it, so that Chapter 2, you can make it to become just like Chapter 4. Then secondly, through judicial activism, let the judges, the courts decide that these rights are enforceable, just like in other jurisdictions. Then the second question has to do with the kinetic and non-kinetic approach to solving insecurity in Nigeria. So the non-kinetic, I think, in my own opinion, has to do with a lot of engagement. You have to engage with some of these people that engage in these activities. Naturally, you see that they engage in such activities because they are not happy with government. They too, they have been deprived, no education, no good housing, no whatever. So they take up arms as a form of fighting the government. So there is a need for government to take up its own responsibilities within those areas. Then number two, dialogue. There is a need to dialogue, because when you dialogue, you discuss, that's when you tend to know even the roots of the problem. So dialogue would help in most cases, to be able to know how do you address some of these issues. Because up to now, you tend to see different opinions as to what are the root causes. It appears as if government is not even listening to this view. So there is a need for discussion. Let us sit on a table and discuss, and let us rehabilitate. That is another third method. Rehabilitate these people that engage in this type of insecurity activities. So these are my own response to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kabiru. So the next will be Professor Ildiko. So time is yours.
Thank you very much for the questions and for the interest. I would say, yes, one of the questions concerned the limits of the freedom of expression. And I would say that also in Europe, we could take it for granted that, for example, hate speech would be banned. But are these unclear burdens are, for example, related to political opinion? So, for example, whether a political opinion has a risk on security or not. And for example, now it's a problem in Hungary as well, the Russian influence. It were serious cybersecurity risks raised in Hungary, whether there is an influence or whether there is only the risk of that, but there were evidences for the presence of such. So, for example, it was also a subject of discourse, even legal discourse, that whether it was a cybersecurity risk or not, which was appeared in a news, in a digital news. So political opinions are borderline, but for example, hate speech yes, call for action against the population, they are granted to be banned. Regarding the AI and banning AI-generated content, in particular electoral processes, I would say that now the regulation is fragmented in the European Union. What is now is an interesting issue. That there is a very new AI Act in the European Union. This AI Act is particularly it has special provisions relating to the so-called high-risk AI technique, high-risk AI solution. This act is not applicable, is still not applicable, and there are many specific problems regarding the applicability. The European Commission is now proposed the extension of the deadline for application. I would say that now the current situation is that only the so-called high-risk AI technical solution could be the subject of ban. But now, regarding the low-risk AI technique, they are not like this. But I would say that in the influence of electoral process could be the subjects of such limitation. So I think that based on the practice of the current regulations in the European Union, which are still not based on the AI Act, but they are the individual regulations of the country, I would say this.
Thank you, Prof. Ildiko. And the next for Prof. Nikmatul Huda, please.
Baik. Kalau kita melihat ke dalam konstitusi, sebenarnya jaminan untuk menyampaikan aspirasi atau mengekspresikan diri itu sudah ada gitu ya. Kenapa mereka harus ditangkap gitu? Berarti kan kekuasaan tidak suka kalau dikritik. Kekuasaan itu tidak suka kalau masyarakat tahu banyak tentang kelemahan-kelemahan dia gitu ya. Sehingga ini bagian dari cara kekuasaan itu menakut-nakuti atau mempressure warga negaranya supaya tidak ekspresif, tidak berani menyampaikan pendapat gitu. Justru dengan cara-cara kayak gini, kalau yang backgroundnya aktivis itu semakin ditekan dia semakin berani gitu kan. Jadi nggak ada yang dilanggar oleh para aktivis itu dalam menyuarakan. Yang nggak boleh caci maki, menghina itu nggak boleh. Tapi kalau menyampaikan aspirasi itu yang dijamin oleh konstitusi gitu ya. Jadi kenapa mereka ditangkap? Alasannya ya dianggap yang ditangkap itu harusnya yang rusuh itu gitu, bukan yang menyampaikan aspirasi. Yang menjara itu yang ditangkap, bukan yang menyampaikan aspirasi gitu ya. Kemudian yang kedua, lantas bagaimana cara kita membangun sistemnya supaya lebih baik gitu ya bagi parlemen? Mungkin agak sulitnya melalui partai politiknya dulu gitu ya. Partai politik itu harus terbuka, membuka diri untuk tidak semuanya selalu ditentukan oleh ketua partai atau elit partai. Nah itu ada disertasinya Pak Jamaluddin Gofur di UI, dia mengatakan sepanjang internal partainya nggak terbuka, sulit. Karena apa? Orang yang bergabung ke partai politik itu terikat oleh ADART gitu ya, anggaran dasar, anggaran rumah tangga, sehingga dia nggak akan bisa mengekspresikan apa yang dititipkan oleh konstituen itu untuk disuarakan. Nah ini ada satu PR tersendiri. Kemudian dialog misalnya, kalau nggak ada peristiwa Agustus kemarin mungkin partai politik di parlemen tidak akan mau membuka diri gitu ya. Maka ekstra parlementer menjadi penting menurut saya gitu ya. Civil society nggak boleh diam seolah-olah kalau kita sudah ikut pemilu itu selesai. Enggak, justru kita terus mengawal gitu ya, bagaimana supaya apa yang ingin diperjuangkan oleh masyarakat, katakanlah gini ya, sambil contoh saja pasal 33 itu ya, bumi dan air dan kekayaan alam yang terkandung di dalamnya dikuasai oleh negara untuk sebesar-besar kemakmuran rakyat. Tapi apa yang terjadi di Sumatera sekarang gitu kan? Apa yang terjadi dengan bencana ini? Kepada siapa kekayaan alam itu dititipkan? Kan negara harus ngatur di situ gitu ya. Nah itu satu contoh saja bahwa ada hal yang harus dibangun secara sistemik, oke, iya, tetapi masyarakat juga harus tahu gitu ya, harus berani menyuarakan aspirasi. Kalau kanal-kanal itu ditutup maka dia punya aspirasi yang lain. Mungkin itu paling sederhananya gitu ya. Karena kemarin di Undip itu begini, MPR itu ingin menyerap aspirasi masyarakat. Saya bilang terbalik. DPR itu kalau pulang ke daerah, ke konstituennya, menyerap aspirasi itu dananya besar sekali. Tapi bagaimana caranya anggota DPR itu mengaspirasikan dari hasil penyerapan aspirasi? Nol, nggak ada itu gitu. Kenapa? Karena dia dibelenggu oleh partainya, sehingga nggak bisa gitu ya. Mungkin itu secara garis besar. Makasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you Prof. Nimatul Huda. And the last, even though there is no question for Prof. Ida, we will ask you to give the general comment or last statement before we close this session. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. I take note that the audience are more interested in human rights rather than, IP to build a business. But intellectual property does involve human rights as well. And as you see, many treaties and even national or countries or domestic legislation has exceptions and allowance to use intellectual property for education, for human rights, so-called human rights, such as for treatment, and all kinds of things. So if we have a very balanced intellectual property, in a way we are also promoting human rights, because intellectual property has many public spheres to it. It has encroached into public needs for information and for medicine and treatment. I just want to comment a bit on use of AI and how that can be regulated. In Malaysia, for example, we are in the midst of drafting an AI law, but we have a few laws that are in play, that are in the pipeline, that are going to deal with use of AI for criminal purposes. You have to remember that AI can also be used for criminal purposes, such as for scam and for cheating others, all right? So the proposed new cybercrime bill will have a specific provision for deep fake and the use of AI to cheat others. And there are several other legislation that are in place to deal with online content, such as we have Online Safety Act now that gives a lot of obligation on social media platform to take down materials if there happen to be harmful content, particularly for children. So even with online content, you have to strike a balance between individual rights and others' rights. Freedom of expression is not everything. You also have to think of the interests of the children. And of course, you have to strike a balance between freedom of expression and criminal activities. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Ida Madiha, for the insightful general comment and closing statement. So, we want to discuss it more comprehensively, but unfortunately, we have limited time. And brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of today's colloquium. So we have traveled across country, not only country, but also continent, from Asia, Europe, and the last Africa. And we did it all without needing a passport and buying a flight ticket. Yeah. Alhamdulillah. So at the last, allow me to express our deepest gratitude to all for speakers for sharing their insight, and for all participants for staying engaged from start until the end. Thank you for your enthusiasm and attention. And at the last, let's give final big round applause for all of us in this session. And the committee give me sign and give me an order to announce the best question and answer. Yeah, there are 4 best question and answer. Please come forward, all of who answer, who ask, and who give the statement. Yeah.
We only have 3, so we will best 3 of all the question and answer.
Okay, maybe wait a minute for discussion with the. Maybe first from Nanda, and the second for Nigeria. Please, Nanda, come forward from Nigeria, and the last for. Oh, from Prasetya Mulia.
Okay.
So please come forward.
Please come forward. And for the speakers, we also invite you to give the prize to the best question and answer. Please, to Dr. Kabiru, Professor Ildika, and also Professor Nikmat, to deliver the prize to those 3 best participants that they have given the questions to the speakers. Thank you. Please give round of applause. And the second one from Professor Ildiko from Hungary. And the last one from Professor Nigma. That's all. Thank you. Please come back to your seat.
Okay, Okay, thank you so much. I will give back the time to the Master of Ceremony.
Thank you for the moderator for leading us for the final session previously. And the next agenda is filling the participant certificate form. So we invite all of you to take a photo first. If the signal is still not there, you can take the photo first and you can fill it later. Yeah. The most important thing, you take the picture, or you can write down the link bit.ly, yeah, bit.ly/ISC form participant. Yeah, ISC form participant. Yeah. Once more, bit.ly/ISC form participant. If you still not got the signal, you can just keep it first to your phone. So that's all the conference for today. We also invite all the presenters to stand by in this auditorium room because we have further announcement for the breakout chambers. One more, for the presenters for ISC 2025, we kindly invite you to stand by in this auditorium room for briefing for our breakout chamber later for the next session. And for all students, that's all. Thank you for your attention. And we close by hamdalah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. For presenters, please stand by in this auditorium room. We'll have further announcement regarding the breakout chambers.